You walk into a marble bank lobby carrying a purse that's older than half the people staring at you. You tell the teller, "You're here to withdraw money from your account," and within minutes a manager, a security guard, and 2 police officers are surrounding you like you just walked out of a movie where you were the villain. That's how my morning started. Yeah, that happened. Act 1. The ordinary morning and the door that opens to judgment. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 73. I live in a small house on Pineview. I drink Earl Grey at exactly 7, and I keep everything in order because my life has always been made of lists, bills, statements, photos in simple frames. My husband Robert served 20 years in the Navy. He taught me to read maps and ledgers. He taught me that money is useful only when it helps someone else. And after he passed 6 years ago, I managed our investments because we built that money together slowly, carefully, and with the intention of giving it away. Not to flaunt it, but to change lives. On this morning, I walked to the bus like I always do. Sat near the front, folded a stroller for a young mom, said, "Good morning," to Raymond, the driver. The world was ordinary and small and soft, you know what I mean. I was going to Summit Ridge Bank downtown, a glass tower that looks like an altar to money, because today I was withdrawing $3 million. Not for me, for the Hayes Scholarship Fund, the annual gift we've given for 6 years to students who don't get a fair shake. I had my withdrawal slip, my worn bank card, my license, a folder with the paperwork, and I had memories. A wedding photo with Robert in uniform, a neat stack of donation receipts. I pushed through the revolving door. The air conditioning hit me, the marble. Under my shoes was cool, and I remember thinking this is where we keep things safe. And I never imagined safety could feel so fragile. Act 2. The questioning, the search, and the turning point. The teller looked at the slip, then at me, then at the number, and her face went pale. "Ma'am, this is $3 million. "Are you sure?" she whispered like she was reading a foreign language. That's when the branch manager, Paul Whitmore, stepped out of his glass office like a man who carries the bank's dignity on his tie, and he looked at me the way a judge looks at a defendant before the jury is seated. "Which account is this for?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, practiced, polite, sharp. "You sure you belong here?" he added like a punctuation mark. He asked for more ID, asked for proof of address, asked how I got the slip, and his questions had teeth. He called security, Greg an ex-cop type, and he called the non-emergency police line. I handed over my ID, my card. I answered every question calmly because I had to. Rage helps no one in that room. But you could feel the air tighten every time someone took a step back, every time someone reached for their phone. The teller's hands trembled as she typed as if the keyboard might break under the weight of the dollars on the screen. Then Officer Tom Reynolds and Officer Rivera arrived, and suddenly 5 people were towering over one small woman in a faded dress, asking me to explain myself as if I had stolen the sun. "We need to search your bag," Officer Reynolds told me, and he said it like it was kind and necessary. I said I wanted it documented. I asked for badge numbers. I said I was recording because dignity without records disappears in the retelling. They emptied my purse corner by corner. Wallet pills, a photo of Robert Breathmints, a folded statement that had my name in black and white. They treated every tissue like contraband. I stood there as they turned my life inside out, and the room watched, some openly filming, some nodding, as if this is what truth looks like. It would have been humiliating enough if that were the end, but there's a thing about humiliation. It can be the seed of something else. I asked them to call Richard Langley, the regional director I dealt with the last few years, because he helped process our donations, and Paul barked that he didn't know him, that he could get corporate on the line. I said, "Call him now," and they hesitated because power likes to pretend its contact list is longer than it is. Officer Rivera finally picked up my phone because I had the number. It was the only place my hand belonged, and she dialed. Richard's voice came through the speaker like someone who understands what a name can do, and he asked very directly, "Is Margaret Hayes at the downtown branch?" There was a silence like a held breath, and Paul's confidence began to unspool. Within seconds, Richard was in the lobby, and he walked like a storm, and he didn't ask permission to kneel by my chair. He said he was sorry before he had all the facts, and he demanded that someone pull up my account. Paul hesitated because the world he knew had rules that didn't require humility, and the screen lit up. account balance, transaction history, years of donations, the Hayes Scholarship entries, and the numbers were loud and undeniable. You could see the color drain from Paul's face like someone had erased his script, and in that small, shivery pause, I felt something shift. Not a miracle, not a wave, but a pivot, a truth pushed into the light. I wasn't just a name on a page. I was a record, a history, a pattern of giving that had built things for other people. I stood up and I looked at Paul and I said, slow and clear, "You humiliated me in front of strangers. You called the police. You had my bag searched. You treated me like a criminal because of the way I looked. That wasn't caution, that was prejudice." He stammered apology, the kind that tries to paper over a cracked window. I told him I didn't want his pity, I wanted accountability. And then Richard walked me to his office hand to elbow like he had meant to all along. Act 3. The aftermath. The courtroom and the seed that became a school. The video from the lobby spread fast. Phones that were pointed at me that day became witnesses, and within hours, strangers were asking what the bank had been thinking. An internal investigation pulled up 2 years of footage, and what they found wasn't one awkward morning, it was a pattern. Wait times longer for certain customers, extra ID asked of certain faces, a consistent tilt of suspicion. Those numbers don't lie. A class action lawsuit followed. I didn't want to be the center of attention, believe me. I wanted the kids with backpacks and too big shoes to get help, but everything about that morning made it clear this was bigger than me. In court, the videos played again, and people watched a grown man call police on an old woman like he was auditioning for a role in a story he'd already decided. The defense called it protocol, I called it bias. The jury called it what it was. The verdict was not just a monetary award. The court ordered systemic change, mandatory bias training, external audits, public reporting, and reparations to dozens of people who had been quietly humiliated through the years. Paul and his deputy were fired, and the bank had to reckon with what its policies looked like when mixed with unchecked assumptions. We used the settlement to expand the Hayes Scholarship into an education center. 3 stories of classrooms, tutor solar panels, a place where kids who've been judged before anyone ever looks at their report card can be seen for their potential instead. On a bright spring morning, we cut the ribbon, and that little girl who had watched the video came forward, hugged my hand, and told me I had stood up for her, and in that hug, I felt the full cost and the full worth of standing up. I'm not telling this for applause. I'm telling it because it's small proof that systems can change when people refuse to let one story be the end. But we have to ask the hard question. Would things have been different if I hadn't had resources, if I hadn't been able to call a name that means something in those rooms? Would the humiliation have been the only headline? That's the part that keeps me awake sometimes. So here's what I want you to think about. Justice that shows up only when someone with power is shoved into the light isn't justice for everyone. It's a privilege. If you saw this and your first thought was sympathy, honey, good. But don't stop there. Ask yourself who in your life has been quietly shoved out, who has been assumed guilty because of their clothes, their accent, their skin. And what are you willing to do to make sure dignity doesn't come with a price tag? If this story moved you, share it, tell someone, and tell your own story in the comments. I want to know about times you were judged and how you handled it, or times you realized you'd judged someone unfairly and changed your mind. Debate with me. Is it enough to fire a manager, or do we need deeper change? If you've got a similar story, put it below because these conversations matter, and the people who can't speak sometimes need our voices more than anything. Life taught me one clear thing. Dignity is not something you earn with money. It's something you extend to others. Today, this week, whenever someone walks into a room and might be carrying the whole of themselves in a single old purse. Tell me, what would you have done in my place?